like to introduce our first presenter, Dr. Simon Grbevski. Dr. Simon is a local practitioner from Sydney, and he works as a Syntonics practitioner and a behavioural optometrist. He's presented both internationally and nationally, and he's the founder of the Australian College of Syntonics and also the founder of the Australian College of Behavioural Optometry. So Simon will be speaking to us today on the topic of the principles of Syntonics. So please welcome Simon. Thank you.
Thank you. But it's been, to realise that this is our first meeting is really an honour and a privilege for that. Thank you. I woke up this morning seeing a bit of rain, but on the way to the station there was this beautiful rainbow. And I thought, oh, this is going to be a great day. Then I arrived at Circular Quay and it's raining and I lost myself. So I am sweating with anxiousness as we spoke with Harry to talk, but at the same time I am wet from the rain too. I've been doing Syntonics since 1986. Syntonics is light through the eyes and helping with visual skills. But what I've learnt over time is that we all interact with light very differently. We experience it differently. And this is mostly because of the way our visual system and the way our bodies are connected together from the eyes to the rest of us. But one of the things, as I was doing this talk, is actually not on Syntonics, but it's on light vision and the development of the child, because I think if we start off from the ground and realise how it's affecting us, then we can probably better connect what the other speakers will be doing. But can you put your hands up if you were born in winter? Oh, winter. Yes. Can you keep your hands up if you were born closer to the poles than... Okay. There's a few of us. All right, I'll tell you why later. Who are those that are born close to the equator? Closer to the equator than Sydney. Okay.
Closer than Sydney.
Closer than Sydney. Yeah, up, Queensland way. I'll tell you about that a bit later, why I asked that question, and you'll see. So, because I work with light through the eyes, and it's not anything new. Okay, even in the Bible, we see that Matthew wrote, "So if your eye is sound, your body will be full of light. But if your eye is not sound, your whole body will be full of darkness." Okay, so it was already known that the light entering our eyes had some influence in it. Okay, when talking about the equator, I went to Cairns once, and going through the beautiful tropical forests there, rainforests. They had a little exhibition, and on that exhibition, it had a very important little saying. Okay, and what it said was that each plant was reaching out for a ray of light. Okay, and so the taller they grow, the closer they were to the sun. But if they only had an inkling of a little bit of light, they were still able to grow and continue on. Okay, so sunlight is by far the most important source of light and energy for the living organism, and it may be experienced by directly affecting us or indirectly with reflected light. Our eyes are actually more used to having indirect light, not direct light. Okay, and this is why the new society is having some problems. As I said, they reach out higher, so the more they are closer to the sun, the stronger and the longer their lifespan seems to be to those things. So if light is so vital to all life forms on this planet, then we need to know more about it. Okay, we need to have more respect and appreciation of it. And with modern times and technologies, we seem to be losing that connection with it. So what do we need to know about light? A good understanding of the light and its properties in the electromagnetic spectrum. Where does it fit? Why is it such a small section is so vital to us? Okay, and the effect of on the environment, where we have an excess or an absence of it. Okay, the word mal-illumination is now becoming a profound statement. The effect and influence of light on our biological system. How does it affect us? In what ways? And of course, my interest is the non-visual effect of light via the eyes. Okay, that there are two pathways. Okay, back in 2004, the CIE, which is the national body on light and its standards, put out a statement, and it's part of their regulations now that, and Carl will probably know more about this because being an architect, that the fact that it has a biological effect needs to be considered when designing light sources. Okay, in those times prior to this, they designed street lights with flare everywhere. Now you'll find that they have a cap on top and it directs the light down, because astronomers can't see the stars because we're polluting these airways. Birds were striking buildings in the middle of the night. Piccadilly Square has their birds breeding twice a year because of the lights that surround them. So we've changed the environment, and biologically have changed that. So it needs to be considered in all the designs and things. So if they're saying it's important, it's important. Okay. All right. So in Moral, what's happened in the recent years is that they've found that there's another cell. It's called a iatrogenic ganglion cell. It's not a rod or a cone. It's actually a connection from the rods and cones off to the brain, and it has a photosensitive function. It's totally separate to the rods and cones. It has its own pathway to the brain, and it is sensitive to the 490 nanometer wavelength, which is also the same for melatonin. Okay, which is also most of the LED blue lights. So, and it goes to the part of the brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, and it's been referred to the biological clock. Okay, so it affects us from the external environment. So the body's biological clock is the first stage that science is coming to, whereas we're more familiar with further aspects, and they're just going to prove what we've found, is that through this particular pathway, it sets rhythms in our body. Okay, our biological clock measures the day length and changes our behaviour according to the seasons. It doesn't matter about seasons, it's actually the day length, irrelevant of season. It is dependent upon the quality and intensity of light in the environment, and it is regulated by the light entering through our eyes. Okay, only through our eyes. And so there's a new science called Chrono-biology, which is studying this aspect, and it's gone leaps and bounds in the research that's happening with that. So with the biological clock, as we see it enters the eye, goes to the first stage, the suprachiasmatic nucleus. It starts the first set of clocks, and then everything else below. You have the organs having their own time and clock through the day, and then it also goes down to the cellular clocks. Okay, so there's a stage by stage by stage. So it's an orchestrated system, and if it's out of harmony, then things will not work properly. And if they don't work properly, then we have disorder and disease. And there's a special name for this non-photic stimulations, Grbevski. I'm not sure if that's pronounced correctly, but it affects our sleep-wake cycles, physical activity, our social time, and also when we eat and do our daily duties. Okay, if you have a look at the title where this study is found, rheumatology. It's interesting, isn't it? Okay, and individually throughout our particular day, not just the seasonal, there are separate clocks within that as well, and this regulates different parts of our function through the day. And we seem to be, again, as I said, offsetting this pattern as things go on. Now, so our lighted environment, how is it affecting us? Just on the upper levels, all right? So in wintertime, we get shorter day lengths, okay? There's less light exposure, less intense light. And so, a lot of this stuff started with seasonally associated depression, the winter blues, as it's called. And it was also noted when the designs of buildings was that sunlight is affecting our control of light we'll get rid of the windows and we can control it with our beautiful lighting systems. And so what happened was that the incidence of absenteeism and illness or sickness from work increased quite dramatically. So now if you notice all the buildings, they're nearly all glass, okay, allowing more light in because of this particular factor. In summertime, the day length is longer and it's also more intense and so brighter. And because of all this is subconscious, you're not aware that this is happening to you, okay? And so business has also incorporated this quite neatly in there in sales process. And the cosmetic sections, if you notice at Myers and David Jones, how brightly lit it is. So it makes you feel wonderful, And then they do the wonderful bright colours, bold colours, which makes you impulsively buy. So subconsciously they're already controlling you without you knowing about it. Okay, so let's start even further. When does this affect us? What happens? Well, Professor McMahon at the Vanderbilt University did a study on mice. Actually, it's not on babies, real babies yet, okay? But what he found was that the circadian clock in mammals is imprinted by the day-night cycle when an individual is born. So as soon as light enters their eyes, there is a process of imprinting. It's like your DNA is set. And this happens, and this imprinting affects our behaviour, but it also affects the neuronal patterns. So those that are born on the north side in winter time, some behaviour patterns start to happen, okay? And what he found was, we know that the biological clock regulates mood in humans. If an imprinting mechanism similar to that we found in the mice operates in humans, then it could not only have an effect on the number of behavioural disorders, but also have a more general effect on personality. Okay, so what he did, he had 3 sets of mice, some that were grown with more light in the day, and others were grown with less light, and others with equal day and light. And then he put them under the different combinations of light and found what happened to their systems. And if we have a look at the bottom one, winter, their biological clock is way out of synchrony, okay? And whereas the summer, they're almost on time to the 24-hour clock. So mice raised in winter cycles show an exaggerated response to a change in season that is strikingly similar to the human patients suffering from SAD. Okay? But the finding may help explain why people born in winter at high latitudes are at greater risk of seasonal affective disorder, bipolar depression, schizophrenia and autism. I run in that pattern. I was born in Macedonia in winter.
Which one have you got?
I think the last two. And I'm bipolar because I went to the wrong side, the south.
when I was growing up, I was born in the UK.
Right.
In summer. In summer.
In summer, yeah. But with our winter babies, my mother used to make a point of taking them out in the pram and putting them in the garden. And the prams in those days had a big hood and that sort of stuff, so they were actually getting extra light during the day. Unfortunately, sometimes she forgot them and
they were out there sunburned, eh?
But other than that, none actually got frostbite, but it's interesting that even then there was a knowledge that, hey, it's winter time, get the child outside. And the other thing they didn't have on their windows in those days is no filtration. So you got full...
And the type of glass was, I think Carl wouldn't be much more versed in this, because the type of glass itself in those days would have been of different quality, different lead levels and things, allowing different frequencies coming through as well. Yes, they did know a lot of those things. I mean, I remember my mum saying, the kids had measles. She says, I'll wrap them around with red material. And I think, what's that got to do with it, you know? But red increases the virus's rate of growth. So instead of 2 weeks, it shortens it down. So it goes through its normal process, but it burns itself out faster. Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, they did know. And this is where these studies now I'm going to go through show that these have been around. Now we're just proving them, proving them in the level so now this current society will accept it.
Sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt. Autism is the one that's going, really, autism? But you know, I've just heard recently that a certain study is finding, early days, that lack of vitamin D from the sun in a pregnant mother may cause to autism in the child. So
there's a lot of research on vitamin D, a lot of research, don't quote me on this, but from my observation, there's two chemicals we need in our body, and that is melatonin and vitamin D. So if they're balanced in your body, the risks of the more nasty diseases is less. Okay.
Both are directly associated.
That's correct. A different part of the day. Yeah, exactly. Okay. So the second one study shows that now we've been imprinted, but what happens, through the seasonal changes? So Barry Bogan, again from the University of Detroit, Michigan, studied the incremental growth according to seasonal patterns in Guatemala school-aged children. Now he's doing this recently, but back in 1777, Buffon already found that there were changes, and then there's more studies such as in Australia, Asia and so on are also reinforcing that in spring and summer the growth pattern is greater than in winter time. Now this would imply, is it because it's brighter light or there's more light in the day? Okay, so with his study, most of these studies are done off the equator, where you get a seasonal change of winter and summer. Where Guatemala is more like winter, summer, So, but what he found was that the Guatemala studies tried to see what happened in tropical zones, that the greater growth occurred during dry season than the rainy seasons. So it's more the intensity of light, not just the duration. That's what it's implying. Not that he said that, but this is what he's implying. Okay? So, and schools are now, and I know of a particular ophthalmologist who's pushing very strongly to have school children wear sunglasses as well as the hat and all these shades. So I don't think they're familiar with these other changes yet. In my field of optometry, back in the 1930s, there was an engineer called Darrell Boyd Harmon, and so he said, okay, what happens if with children in the classroom, they're spending so much time, how can we improve it for them? Because the visual problems were were occurring. So what he did is he designed the classrooms, redesigned them. He found some very interesting changes once he did these designings. Okay, he created a seating arrangement where every child could see the teacher the same as the other. So it would be an arc pattern, not a one behind the other. Okay, so that you would be beside each other and you can see what's happening there. He designed the seats so that they're ergonomically proper for each child, and he also changed the lighting of sunlight distribution through the classroom. So what he did was that, let's say this is the window and these childs are getting nice sunlight, they're getting room light but not much sunlight, so they're getting glare. Okay, so what he designed was that this child and that child got exactly the same level of lighting, of sunlight distributed through that. And as I said, he found some very interesting and very profound findings. So now in recent days, they're repeating all these studies. The latest one is Hathaway, where he used 5 different type of lighting systems setups in the classroom. Okay, he used high pressure sodium vapor lamps, which are sort of a yellow colour, full spectrum without UV. Another one was full spectrum with UV, and then cool white, and then full spectrum again with the UV again. And so he monitored these children over a few years, and what happened was they had these profound changes. Dental caries, improved attendance, onset of menage, gains in height, gains in weight, reduced body fat, and the academic achievement improved quite a bit. Okay, so this isn't what you anticipate, but the hyperactivity varied between those light sources as well. The cool white was where they were hard to manage, whereas the full spectrum, irrelevant with or without UV, it was much better with them. So these are some percentages, and 3 and 5 is the full spectrum with UV. Okay, so we got nice large changes, and less body fat than just the full spectrum without the UV. But the important one is the one down the cool white. The body fat shrunk enormously. So there's the curiosity why this happened. So it's not sure, but it was an interesting observation that happened now. Okay, so we need to have them to experience daylight. So the effect of lights on children. So children respond on average, or spend on average 6 hours a day in the classroom where they're out of the sun. And from kindergarten onwards, and each year they spend more and more time indoors, and more time spending it at close distances, not distance viewing. And like any system, if you're going to exhaust it, it's going to look for a change, and it's going to lose its coping mechanisms, and somehow, inevitably, it's going to give up somewhere. Okay, so classroom performance. So we've seen there's hundreds of them, of these studies now being done on classroom lighting levels. There's Wolfart, there's Hathaway, as I said, and all those others, and there's other universities in the States, just reinforcing the fact that the quality of light is important. It reduces hyperactivity, improves health and behaviour. Under full spectrum lamps with ultraviolet, enhanced students developed fewer dental cavities, had better attendance achievements, growth and development than students under other lights. Increased attention and academic performance. Several research reports showing that fluorescent light increased hyperactivity because of the lack of particular wavelengths that are in those light sources. So the full spectrum or incandescent lighting was probably the better way to go. And this is your normal illuminated classroom. That's a sunlit classroom. Okay? And same in the office settings as well. Okay, this was back in the 1930s. Darrell Boyd Harmon's study. 53% of children had visual difficulties. After 6 months of being in that sunlit room, it went down to 18%. A 65% improvement. Nutritional problems from 71 to 37. Chronic infections from 75 to 42. Huge changes. Okay, just on adjusting the light source, the fact that they could get outside indoors at the same time. And this is again coming up in current research with visual problems. So as we've seen, that light affects our moods. 40% of the population suffers with depression in the States. So that's an enormous amount of people. That's an enormous amount of medications that they take. All right. SAD, Dan Ornish, who did a lot of the initial research in SAD, found that it was 98% totally influenced by light entering the eyes, SAD, and it's only 2%. What he did was he made them naked, covered their eyes and exposed them to the light, and then covered them totally, only their eyes exposed, and the effects were clinically shown that it was the eyes that triggered the process again. And the circadian rhythms, sleep patterns, and as we spoke, melatonin levels affect a lot of the cancers, and it affects metabolism a lot. Dr. Holwick is actually a ophthalmologist, and he wrote a whole book on this, and with cataracts and cortisol. So what happens is in those days, as patients got cataracts, it becomes more and more dense, so that less light goes into the eyes. So he took their blood levels before surgery, and then he took their blood levels after surgery, and found that the cortisol levels dropped dramatically after. So less light going into their body made them more unhealthy. So it led to problems. So cataracts increase the bilirubin levels. So your liver's going to start to play up. And if that plays up, then there will be other consequences. And these are subtle. You're not going to realise what happened. Okay, it's just as most of these systems is that we're working with a dynamic system, a human being. And they also found that blind children mature much later sexually because of the impact of the less light getting into their system. So, and again, coming back to my field, there's an increase in visual problems these days, okay? And why is that? Because kids are spending more time indoors, they're more in the urban centres, where they're less outdoors in the exposed distances as well. There's more time under artificial lighting, and there's more time doing close-centred work. Okay, so their world is now somewhere between 2 metres and 3 metres. Okay, whereas if you remember, your world was somewhere between 6 metres and 300 metres. You spent it outdoors. You weren't doing much of that close work. And there's this increase in exposure to computers, TVs, mobiles, phones, and nearly every child has something, one of those. So the epidemic of eye problems, because of the increased visual demands of academics, pushing for academics and increasing that, and the increased time indoors, and the increased time on electronic mediums, has created a condition or an epidemic of short-sightedness. Okay, nearsightedness is the ability to see close up, not far away. Okay, so it's just an optical problem. In other words, optically you can see things here, not as easy far away. But what it actually is that the back of the eye is now increasing. It's stretching. So it's the same tissue, but it's stretching now. And as it stretches, it weakens the tissue. And the higher the power that it becomes, the more weak that is, and therefore it's prone to severe retinal damage, blindness, and so on. So it is a concern because by 2050, half the world is going to be short-sighted. Okay. When I graduated, we had in Australia about 10% of university students were short-sighted, Now we're getting that in high schools and even starting at the infants' primary schools. Whereas in other countries where the demand for close work is high, we can see the exponential growth of short-sightedness. By the age of 17, 75% of Taiwanese or Asian kids are short-sighted. Okay, so they're going to look at ways to try and stop this now. So it's a huge amount of research going into this project, and it was very interesting what they found. Let me go back. Okay, so all the studies did was they had a great opportunity. They've got Asian kids over there and they've got Asian kids here. And so they said, okay, why are the Asian kids not progressing as well, becoming more myopic here than they are over there? I said, we're a more outdoor country, we like playing sports. Okay, let's take those kids out. No, we're still less than that. So the end result was that it was being outdoors, exposed to sunlight. Nothing to do with their activity, nothing to do with distance viewing. Okay, just the fact that they were outdoors 12 hours was enough to slow the process down. Okay. So because it's an epidemic and they have very high, so their goal is to try and prevent this problem. So they have daily rituals of doing eye exercises. Okay. But there's no real research to show that that's really stopping it, but it is slowing things down, it's relaxing the kids. Currently, what they're doing is they have designed very new desks, very ergonomically desks, where this is where you rest your book. Okay, so it's further distance, therefore the visual demand's much less. Okay, all right, that's not enough, because when you're writing, it's got to be different. So what happens now is we pull it back, and you're not allowed to get close up. All right? So it's forcing them to try and keep these habitual patterns, okay? And it's still early stages in seeing what's happening there. But because of the studies on the lighting, and as we found what Darrell Boyd Harmon did, was now they've introduced... we're just going through that. The daylight reduces it. 12 hours a week was the study showing they need to be outdoors to start showing some significant changes there. And it's the recent studies are also showing it's not only experiencing the bright light, but you need to experience part of the day with low light. And in artificial lighting, you go to bed straight after you switch the light off. There's no experience of moonlight. They've got these sunlit rooms, a total box of sun, to try and see if that's going to help. So they're redesigning it, which is what, as I said, back in the 1930s, somebody did it, and now we're trying to incorporate it in there. Okay. So, and as we've now mentioned earlier, the vitamin D levels also have some effect on it. So, if their vitamin D level is less than 20 when they get it measured, they're 2 times more likely to have short-sightedness, the incidence of it. Okay. And why screen time before bed is bad for children? Okay, because these are a lot of the questions we're getting now in the office. Okay, nearly all our adolescents have at least one form of electronic medium, including from 6 years old, including 2 years old. When they come to the office, here, you play with this while I get tested. All right, in 2014, 90% of studies reviewed found that consistent evidence that sleep was being hampered by screen time, especially those World of War game, where they would be up 24 hours a day, stopping to go out for breaks or eating, and there were actually a number of deaths because they got to that level where they got addicted to these things. So longer screen time seems to push them forward, and so they don't go to sleep. The concept is that all the new electronic mediums have LED backlit. LEDs are more blue, which, as we've noticed, that blue is the colour that stops melatonin, and so therefore they're staying up later. It's resetting the circadian clocks, and so there's going to be some changes in them. All right, their whole patterns. And if they're born in winter time, they're going to be more drastic. If they're born in summertime, they're probably not as drastic, but they're going to be there. And so they're less outdoors. They're not exercising. Physically, they're not moving anymore. All right. So bright light at night can also disrupt the body's natural occurring circadian clock by suppressing the release of the hormone melatonin, which is important for maintaining and regulating sleep-wake cycles. Okay. Getting on time? Plenty time. All right. Well, I'm going a little too fast because I'm still getting here. All right. Okay. So, in summary, we are dependent on light as organisms, and baby's biological clock is preset at birth and is dependent on the latitude or the day-night ratio that it's born, and it's imprinted in it, and then also that in our environment, the exposure of the length of light will determine some of our growth. So their maturation levels change by that. And it's not just the sunlight, but it's the quality of light, or the spectral distribution that is much more critical. And whereas the sun has all the frequencies, man-made artificial lights doesn't have those frequencies. Okay, especially the fluorescence. And fluorescents have more of that blue. It was also the flicker cycles that our bodies are sensitive enough to detect those changes in flicker. The new ones are electronic ballasts, so they're not flickering supposedly as much, but the light source there, everything's going into LEDs, okay, to save energy, but at the same time now LEDs are also arsenic based, so it's a new concern with time, and they need UVA. Okay, now for conversion of vitamin D, we need UVB, which is the more dangerous one, and UVC is extremely dangerous, which doesn't get to us. Our atmosphere actually stops it, but UVB can get through when the sun is right above us at zenith. Okay, and that's the time that we can convert vitamin D, and that's the time that say you're not allowed to get out. All right, so it's a catch-22. It's there for a purpose, and we need to have some of it, maybe not all of it, and the level of exposure. So there's a big thing in optometry or in the eye care situation is the dangers of blue light. Okay, so anything that's got blue is dangerous for your eyes. Is the process, but as we see, it's dangerous in excesses if it's constantly the same thing. You know, if you drink water only, you're going to die too. If you don't have the right air, you're going to die. Everything in moderation and the appropriate levels for what our systems need. Okay, and the visual problems are being onset much earlier. As I said, we're getting them at 6 and 7 year olds, and the younger they start, the higher the risk of them being very high short sight, which is the higher risk of the pathological state of the eye disease, and daylight robbery on the visual system, where they're not getting out in the sun. We're not getting out in the sun. You know, how many have had your D levels measured? How many have realised it's at the normal level? At the normal level. How many have had their vitamin D level measured? How many have it still at the normal level?
Well, it was low after winter and it was high at the start of summer.
Yeah, well mine's always low because I'm always indoors in a dark room, and I think James will find the same thing.
My doctor said that she hardly ever sees anyone who hasn't got low vitamin D levels when they're tested.
Sorry, I didn't quite.
He said most people have low vitamin D levels that she has seen for tests.
That's true. Yeah, 30% of people in Australia are vitamin D deficient.
What's an ideal level?
Ideal levels over 100. Over 100. Normal levels start from 50 up. So if you've got 50, then the doctors are happy you're okay. Mine were 26.
There's a doctor in the US who's been doing research into vitamin D levels and the age. And she's actually questioning what we classify as baseline vitamin D. And she's saying we're underestimating what we need. And she said as you get older, your need for vitamin D actually increases. And without the vitamin D, she says a lot of the symptoms you get are similar to
Rickets.
dementia. Increasing the vitamin D helps hold that back. So, I have MS, so one of the things that they know about
Yes.
MS is because it's a immune support problem, immune system problem, vitamin D really helps with that.
Yeah.
So I supplement.
Yeah, well, we've had 12-year-olds in the office that have been early signs of MS, and they're on 3,000 a day. And they get out a little bit more than we do. The thing with vitamin D is that it's not just to help absorption of calcium, it actually tells where the calcium goes. Okay, that's the more important thing. And every cell has calcium. It's not just your bones. And so it is a very key factor,
Calcium also helps neurotransmitters. It carries neurotransmitters.
That's right. There's huge research on the concerns that the D levels being so low that we're, illnesses of a high incidence of things. Yeah, it's profound the stuff that it's coming up with. So D is converted through sunlight, okay, which is what we're needing, which is what we're cutting out. And with the epidemic of myopia, they're just showing that so obviously that this is one of the things that they need to have, the experience of full sunlight. Okay, see, sunlight outdoors is in the measurements, it's 40,000 lux. Okay, in here we may be lucky, maybe 500 lux. So it's relative darkness, but we've got the spectrum quality out there than we don't in here. Yes.
Yeah, just as an ex-paddler living in Sweden these days, I was reading about Australia and rises in things like bone density issues, osteoporosis and things like that, ironically due to lack of exposure to the sun is one of the proposed reasons. And just as a casual observation, it's by no means scientific, but when I got back to Sydney, I was so surprised after this record sunny and warm summer, how pale people look here in the middle of summer. Because I'm expecting sort of bronze roses, and I sort of went, okay, I'm on holiday, so clearly the week over because I see the middle of summer.
Yes.
And perhaps that's because I understand the real epidemic of skin cancers, and perhaps that whole skin cancer association in the mornings and the sunscreens and all that have overcompensated somewhat. And that's what it appears to be. I'm saying that's what it is. So people become scared of the sun because of the extreme issues of damage from sun, as you were saying, all things in moderation, but perhaps that there needs to swing back a little bit to enjoy that sun maybe again. Yes.
The endocrinologists are coming in again. The dermatologists are saying you got to, cover yourself and not out there. And now the endocrinologists are saying, hold on, our endocrine system is now depleting itself. We need to balance it out. So, and this is, the growth process. The kids need to be exposed to this sunlight to trigger these processes of natural maturation. We start cutting those, then there's going to be things that we're not aware of what will be happening, but all of a sudden the illnesses and things will be happening. Kids in our office are coming in at 7 and 8-year-old with depression and anxiety attacks. So why is that happening? There's a whole change in dynamics. We need to be aware that light is part of us and it's an important factor. All right.
Well, I tried to approach the Queensland government concerning the vitamin D levels in children, and I found it was important educate our children. And after a third email, so they told me they had enough research, and so basically they didn't want to know about it. It's really good answer.
No, unfortunately, fear controls much more than the positive part. And as I said, there's an ophthalmologist now setting up that every child's going to end up with sunglasses in every school. You know.
So I'm just trying to understand, because I've thought, well, okay, in Australia, during the summertime, just go for a walk outside of peak periods, right? But then you might be indoors for the rest of the time. But it sounds like what you're saying is not only that, but maybe in the shade, make sure to get out in the peak time.
Yes.
Especially for the eyes.
Especially for the D. The eyes, it doesn't matter. Because anywhere between that 10 to 4 o'clock is bright enough. But for the deconversion, the optimal is about midday when the sun is right above you. And that's when the UVB actually penetrates through the atmosphere and you're able to convert it better.
So if you need that on the skin during that period of the day in Australia,
yes,
without sunscreen,
yes,
how long is recommended?
You don't need to be out there, depending on your skin colour. If I may choose you, you'd only have to be there for 10 minutes. It's well below the exposure. Where the darker the pigment, you've got to be there longer. It's got to penetrate the melanin through your skin to do that. So there's something else that's coming in my mind while we're talking, but it's going anyway. Yeah, it's zenith, irrelevant of what our clock is, when the sun is right above you. Yeah, so it would be 1 o'clock relatively. But when you look up and it's there, there's in vision improvement you have a thing called sunning, okay, which is you go outside, you close your eyes and let the sun shine through your closed lids. And this is also a process of recalibrating your circadian clock too. Because your head posture tells the body, says, oh, it's straight up there, therefore, it would be a different part of the day. And then the intensity of the light, and although it's going through your lids getting more red, it's still telling your body that this is the day. So jet lag, you can readjust by doing some of that in the morning and the afternoon. There are other studies where with nurses, 120,000 nurse study showed that over 40% ended up with breast cancer because of the circadian pattern being thrown out. And if they were in there 15 years doing night shift, the incidence was that high. So, and they know it. Nurses know about that. So, yes.
One question. As you've been speaking, one question which came to mind was, and it sort of links in with what you're saying about vitamin D, is neural coding of the biological clock, is there any research that's been done in terms of the genetic link and with how the biological clock works and the processing of vitamin D? And I guess my question is coming from someone who's first generation Italian Australian. So both my parents were born in the Northern Hemisphere. And
yes.
So is it in the blood?
I don't know. Chrono-biology is doing a lot of that work and it's showing tremendous effects. But what I have noticed, it's again anecdotal, it's not scientific. A lot of females that come from the north side to the south side for at least the first few years have tremendous emotional problems and hormonal issues. When I go up on the north side, I seem to be more energetic because that was where I was born. So my biological system says, I'm in my realm. And so I am more open, I'm more outward. Down here, I'm a little more reserved and cautious.
Yeah, answers my question.
Yeah. Yeah. It's you watch it yourself. If there are no more questions, yes.
Just with something you were saying before with computer screens.
Yes.
Because because I'm on the computer a lot.
Yeah.
It's part of my job. But at night time, you've got the applications that will just have the remove blue.
Yes.
But then the contrast is
Poor.
tricky sometimes, so which can create another problem. Obviously, one of the solutions is done with screen at night.
Yeah.
But how problematic is it with those applications with strain on the eye?
What they're finding is when you start lowering these retinal quality monitors, they actually start to flicker, and you start to pick that up a little bit. So one is you've reduced the intensity, so you've got to increase your contrast response in your eye. There's a little bit of flicker, which is worse for you. So having it on full is probably still the process. And it's that wavelength, so I'm not sure about the actual wavelength that comes through the LED combination in these monitors, whether it's actually in that, it is in that band, but how much of that 490 area is being triggered more. But what I feel will happen soon, not the monitors are going to change, you're going to have a screen that'll have a filter on it. Because we come out, we provide prescriptions that have what's called blue blockers that cut out only that wavelength. So the lens looks reasonably clear, but it cuts out that wavelength. So people that are on there for 8 hours, 12 hours a day, they're probably beneficial for them. Okay, I don't advocate it for everyone, but it's only for those particular people, not for outdoor activities or any other activities. Yes.
Just sort of be worth asking a person in your field. I've noticed computer use is very big in winter in Sweden, and the kids are all well off, so they all have their own multiple mobile and computing devices. And they're big into gaming, and there's huge gaming centres with 200-300 computers in a giant hall. They're all doing that. But what they sell at the counter, amongst lots of energy drinks and sugar, is
the orange,
these yellow lens glasses,
yeah,
which is the opposite to the blue to attempt to neutralise it.
Yes.
What effect do you feel that has?
There are no studies, but what may be happening, okay, is that you're now cutting that wavelength, but you're increasing the orange wavelength, so you're still giving a monochrome process, and Carl will cover that part on some of the effects of monochrome. They're more specific, more precise. So I'm not sure whether the yellow filters are the right thing, because you've taken from one depth to the next. So, technology is giving us all these wonderful things, but we've got to produce all these compensatory things in between. So why not use the one that really works and covers everything? Why have to compensate for it? And in that compensation, you're not sure what you've offset as a secondary process as well.
So you would say the same thing about these screen-saving devices that change things to gold, yellow, pink? Yeah. So they're going to. The whole process is you need full spectrum. The sun level of distribution of each frequency that your body will work with, and you take those out. John Ott was the first that really brought this into awareness. John Ott was the time-lapse photographer for Walt Disney. He started that, and he found that if he used certain lights, he could actually change pumpkin seeds to male seeds or to female seeds. Animal husbandry started with a lot of his research. Minks would be put under a red light, they would be more males. If they were a blue light, they would be more females. Don't quote me on that, could be the reverse. But what he did was he showed that the light source that the pregnant mother was in changed the sex of the infant. Okay, it changed those. So the quality of light is important for all of us. It's not just light. It's at specific areas. Thank you.